My journey started in security really in college when I was a physics student at Princeton. And I had a dual program. I was both a physics major and also studying dance. And I actually danced professionally for a couple of years and have kind of always integrated the arts into my life and experiences and work. I then joined the Peace Corps. I was teaching physics to over 600 students in a small village in Guinea. I think somewhere in here is my good friend and colleague, Catherine Futrell, who's currently living in Guinea. So I'm really excited to have some representation here today from there. And then I went back to a master's program at Stanford where I studied cyber policy and security in the international policy program and also computer science with a focus in AI. And when I was leaving my program, I really wanted to serve in the government, and I wanted to work for a great leader. And that's how I found my way to Jen Easterly, who I'm sure many of you know, who has been an incredible mentor and leader of the agency and has given me some super interesting projects to work on that I'm very excited to talk to you all about. So,
thank you, Lisa. But one thing, just before we dive in, I did some research on you, as obviously as I'm going to interview, and I noticed you have some musical talent as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can't tell you about talent, but I can tell you that I like music. I mean, I grew up at a performing arts school. So
Yeah.
grade 4 to 8, I was going from like math class to music class to dance class. And so the arts were always part of the way that I learned and took in things. And I moved actually in high school to a regular public high school. And I was like, what the heck? We don't get to like dance during the day at school. And so I actually had to learn myself through writing songs. So whenever I had to memorize something for biology, one of the reasons I liked physics was because you just derive things from scratch. You don't have to memorize things. I hate memorizing things, find it super hard. So I liked kind of writing down first principles and deriving things. And whenever I had to memorize things, I would write songs. And I have continued to do that. My undergraduate thesis at Princeton was focused on teaching foundations of quantum mechanics through a dance theater piece. I have continued.
When do you hear that? Right?
I have continued partially because Jen is so supportive of these particular proclivities. You know, we've written cybersecurity awareness songs together.
Right. And there is a CISA song, right? Did you tell me that? Is there a CISA song?
There may be a public service awareness campaign being released this week that includes a song, maybe.
And did you write that song?
I was engaged in the process of creating that song.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, it's good to always
keep
get
your
some
eyes
peeled. You'll post on your LinkedIn when it comes out.
Sure.
Okay.
Now that you've demanded that I do that.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about CISA. So what brought you, obviously Jen Easterly brought you into CISA, you've been doing that work, and now you've moved into this focus on AI. What sort of brought you into that?
So I studied AI at Stanford. That was my master's program. And I was engaged in research both on AI in education and also in the safety and security of safety critical systems, which is basically completely aligned with the critical infrastructure work that CISA does. So just to give people some groundwork, CISA is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. We love security so much, we put it in the name twice. I know all of you here love security just as much since you're here at the RSA conference. And we are responsible for securing the critical infrastructure that we all rely on every hour of every day. Now, what do I mean by that? So just as an example, I went to Yosemite this weekend, and we stopped to get gas on the way home, swiped my credit card to pay for that gas, and then, you know, when I got home, was super thirsty from our hike, and I turned on the lights, and I got a big glass of water. So these are all the critical systems that underpin our everyday lives. They're super different and diverse, and they are also incredibly interconnected and underpinned by technology. And as you've probably heard all day in this AI aspect of the conference, there are AI tools being integrated into every aspect of those critical systems, whether it's just automating business processes or more critical functions. And we have a responsibility as a society to make sure that we're doing that in a way that is safe and secure, and CISA has a super critical role to play in that.
Excellent. Now, let's get right to a little bit of the meat.
Yeah.
What worries you?
So we're seeing with AI security echoes of a previous generation of software security challenges, right? So for the past couple of decades, we have had this problem of business incentives forcing people to rush products to market that are not built with security in mind. And that's why CISA started its Secure by Design initiative last year. Who here has heard of the Secure by Design initiative? Love it. I wish I could pass a mic and give someone a pop quiz, but probably too complex for this moment. So the Secure by Design initiative basically says we need the responsibility for security to lie with the people who have the most power to do so, not the end user. So I talked about this PSA, right? There are these 4 things you need to do to stay safe online. We need to install multi-factor authentication. We need to update our software. We need to have strong passwords. We need to think before we click. But we shouldn't have to think so hard about those things if the products that we were relying on in our everyday lives were built by secure by design in the first place. And so these AI security vulnerabilities are really that particular dynamic on steroids, because everyone is rushing to get their AI products to market. Some of the smaller AI companies are less integrated into our security ecosystem. And so I'm just worried that those same incentives that has driven a technology backbone that is replete with vulnerabilities are going to play out times 1,000 in the AI landscape.
And we've already had here's maybe I'm going to be very pessimistic here. We already have you guys pushing, hey, you need to secure your software, secure by design. Cloud has already been here forever, and we've gotten. Could you say, are we more secure, less secure because of cloud? And now, or I would just say different types of maybe security issues. And then AI coming around, do we have any hope at which it's going to be any different?
Oh, I have to say we have hope.
Okay, tell me a little bit more.
I'm here from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security.
Tell me a little bit more. Why in AI do we think it's going to be different?
Well, I would question the premise that AI is totally separate from all of those other security initiatives. I mean, cloud is so foundational to AI, so AI is a type of software. And so the first thing that we did when we were developing our AI roadmap, which I highly recommend all of you read, it's on CISA.gov/AI, we said, okay, AI is advancing very quickly. We need a roadmap to make sure that we amplify the possibilities associated with this technology and mitigate the risks. But our mission to reduce risk to the critical infrastructure that Americans rely on every hour of every day does not change just because AI is here. So we went about trying to identify the ways that our current programs, cybersecurity programs, fit into this roadmap in the way that we were thinking, and where we might need to augment some of those a little bit. But with the critical focus on not remaking every wheel here, because cybersecurity is so foundational to every aspect of AI security. So we landed on these 5 lines of effort. The first line of effort is responsible use for our mission. So we're not going to be able to secure a world where AI systems exist if we're not using it ourselves. I think that's a pretty intuitive point that someone else made on this panel before me. Second, AI assurance. So this is where there's no bad guys involved. It's just partners are using new systems, and they may have some probabilistic aspects to them now. And so software assurance just needs to be taken to a slightly different level with AI assurance, and there are some new things that we need to think about. So we're working on providing guidance to our partners related to the implementation of these new systems. No bad guys yet in our minds. Line of effort 3 is when the bad guys come in. So they're either using malicious tools that are augmented by AI tools. They were going to do bad stuff anyway, but now maybe they're 60% better because they're using a large language model to support their methods or something like that. So we're working to protect critical infrastructure partners from malicious actors who are either amplifying what they're doing or taking advantage of new vulnerabilities in AI tools. For example, maybe trying to take advantage of a major data center or something like that, where that is more a part of the picture because AI is involved. And then those are 3 strategic lines of effort, and then we have 2 enabling lines of effort around collaboration and education, which are pretty intuitive.
Okay, so helping educate the enterprises or the infrastructure around AI and what they're doing. Can you give me some real life examples of how that works? Like when I think, and again, I'm not close to infrastructure, but when I think of infrastructure, I think you go to these like power plants or water plants, and you don't actually even think of a lot of technology, or even if they do have technology, you kind of almost in some sense hope it is manual. Right? And it's not automated and it's not connected. And then like how do these people who are either bad or good, less technically advanced
Yeah.
and or automated, and say, oh, we're going to go use AI. How does that even work? And how does that education even happen?
It's such a good point. So critical infrastructure is incredibly diverse, and most of it is in the private sector. So I want to does anyone want to just shout out what percentage of our critical infrastructure you think is in the private sector? Sorry? I heard 95. Yeah, 85.
I heard 90.
That's about right. I mean, it's hard to estimate fully, but something like 80% of our critical infrastructure is private sector. So it's not like we have a monopoly over protecting it in some way from CISA, though one of our roles, in addition to critical infrastructure risk reduction, is being America's cyber defense agency. So we do play that role specifically for the federal government, for protecting .gov. But what you point out here is that critical infrastructure is so diverse. So you're talking about power plants and water.
Yep.
You're also talking about education and healthcare. You're also talking about financial sector, which is incredibly sophisticated in its processes and is probably using AI in entirely different ways. So we actually were tasked in the executive order on AI that President Biden signed in October to do risk assessments across critical infrastructure. So we were coordinating as the national coordinator for critical infrastructure the assessment of risks of integrating AI tools into new systems, and then we looked as the national coordinator at how these risks are different and similar across different sectors. Yep. So we didn't actually do every single one because there are different agencies that are the leads for those things, but we did 8 sectors in one subsector. And then we looked at all of those assessments, and we created guidelines for safety and security for critical infrastructure owners and operators. They were just released last week. Highly recommend going back to that CISA.gov/AI, taking them, downloading them for your maybe your flight home if you're flying, and reading them, because
or use AI to get you the synopsis of it.
We tried to be quite brief, so I would recommend reading every word, but. It's not actually that long, and it's meant to mitigate the cross-sector risks. So every sector is going to have different things they're going to need to look at because they're at different maturity levels, and they have different uses for these tools. However, there are things that are going to be relevant to every single sector, and that's what we tried to identify in these guidelines.
So can you give me some examples that you've got in those that you've just released?
Sure. So as one example, making sure that security is a CEO level priority. So this is actually, again, as I was saying, there are going to be these nitty gritty, protect your data sources, et cetera, sorts of things. But at a high level, this comes back to incentives. And many of the owners and operators being in the private sector, we want them to take responsibility for integrating security into every aspect of the work that they're doing.
So that's a great, I think, intent. Can I ask you a little bit about, when I think about this, I'm like 100% I'm on board. But when you think about it working out in the real world, of course, every CEO is going to say, yes, security is critical. Yes, security is important. But when you actually look at the practical implications of that, how does that, versus saying it versus actions, what happens there? What has your experience been?
Yeah, so as just one example, I've seen CEOs who have said, we're going to include in top level leaders at this company, we're going to ask that they are given bonuses or promotions based on how much they integrate security into their plans, as one example.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So when you've gone and talked with these people, how many of these have sort of signed up to your point where not literally signed up, but said, yes, this is something that we're going to think about. This is something we encourage and we want to get on board with?
I think there's an appetite for it because people recognize that customers are going to start demanding this, and all of us can be a part of that revolution. Yeah. People are scared of AI. I think people are excited, but they're also scared. Yeah. And I think we have a responsibility as providers and protectors of these systems to build these systems with trustworthiness as a top priority. I will say that this application is an open question for a lot of people. So you might have seen that NIST recently, the Department of Commerce and the National Institute of Standards and Technology just put out a first draft. It's open for public comment on these testing and evaluation standards for AI systems. And some of the research, the lab that I was in at Stanford is working on some of these questions of how do you actually, okay, great, we know that AI needs to be resilient, we know it needs to be safe, secure, trust, like all these aspects of trustworthiness. As you said, what does that mean in practice? How do we measure that?
Yeah.
And this is a genuinely open research question that many people are working on and that is going to take all of us. So if any of you are in that field, I highly recommend that you read that document and respond to the public comment, because this is something that we really are going to keep learning as a society and working together to figure out what it means. And as much as we can have these high-level principles, that every step we're trying to grill down. So, you know, the guidelines that we put out are kind of a double click on safety and security. The G7 commitments, which my State Department colleagues led on, you know, those were much higher level, that were broader, but we have to start somewhere. And we're kind of all together working on making sure that we have a future that is secure by design.
So what, you know, I'm going to go back to this what worries you question, and then also specifically about what you just said here, which is, okay, there's a lot of questions around AI and the models. What is the thing that really sort of worries you most? Or maybe another way to phrase it is, what problem needs to really be solved there that you think is maybe number one?
I think the testing and evaluation question is something that needs to be solved, because we can say all day that we need companies to prove that they have built a trustworthy system, a trustworthy AI system in particular. But the question of what does that mean and who's evaluating it is a very important one, and there's lots of work being done on it. But it is not a solved question, and it's going to be an iterative question that we have to answer as a society.
And how do we define trustworthy? Like,
oh, that actually is defined.
Okay, yeah. This is great.
So the NIST AI Risk Management Framework is another great piece of reading if you're taking notes and want to go read a bunch of things after this. And there are these elements of trustworthiness, and they include things like safe, secure, fair with bias managed, et cetera.
Yep.
I'm not going to, there are 7 of them.
Yep.
And these are these building blocks that we want our AI systems to embody, for lack of a better word.
So basically what you're saying, the biggest problem is how do we audit to
Yes.
verify these non-bias, this safety, this security, and what is the list of things or the standards at
Yeah.
which we can now go and go
That's
do
right.
this?
I wouldn't say biggest. It is a problem. There's a lot of big problems. Like I actually think.
Give me another one.
Okay, I'll give you
Give me
another
another
one. Another one. I'll give you 2 more real quick.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So one of them is actually being able to integrate AI quickly enough in government to keep up with our adversaries. So, of course, we need to be careful. I think probably in the private sector, the problem is more people shipping products too fast without security in mind. And I think the government sometimes has the opposite problem of it's so hard to integrate new tools, and we can be very risk averse. And I'm actually very proud of the Department of Homeland Security, which is where CISA lies, because our Chief AI Officer, Eric Heisen, who's a fantastic person, is very forward-leaning in helping us use AI tools when they are low risk, right? There's a big difference between using AI to decide whether someone should be, I don't know, given a visa. I'm just picking a random example, and using a large language model to summarize a public press release, right? Those are completely different risk profiles, and we actually at CISA are, and within the entire Department of Homeland Security, thanks to Eric's work, there's a policy that there are these pre-approved tools that we can use for our day jobs to help us focus on the more impactful parts of our jobs, which I'm sure many of you who are in the private sector is a no-brainer. You're like, oh yeah, we can use ChatGPT all day. And we, if we go through a training, are able to use those tools for, as long as obviously
I
we're
actually
just using
think
publicly
you guys are
available
more
data.
advanced than most of the private sector enterprises.
Maybe.
Who, what I'm hearing, are just blocking ChatGPT and don't even have. You're actually ahead, I think, on a lot of these private
Well, I give a lot of credit to Eric
areas.
for that. And,
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's so much redundant work that happens in government that is necessary for our roles, but there's so much, there's too much work for everyone. So the more we can integrate some of these tools, the better.
I want to dig a little bit into this. Sort of, we need to be able to use AI versus, let's say, our nation state enemies using AI.
Yeah.
when you think of that, what are the kinds of things that you're thinking of, right? What are we worried about that they are getting ahead of in AI versus us?
So I think right now, what we are seeing is that bad people are using AI tools, bad people, nation states, et cetera, to augment things that they were already going to do. So phishing emails are getting better. Deepfakes are getting better. Cyber incidents can be, if someone is using a Copilot-like tool, they're able to code 60% faster. In the same way, my former colleagues at Stanford are using ChatGPT not ChatGPT, but any other sort of large language model to help them code more quickly.
Yep.
And so I think it's just the pace of everything moving forward so quickly.
And then you also notice that you said our government and the use of government, of AI within the government to help us move forward. What about other governments? And you're the person who's in charge of that is allowing you guys at CISA to be able to use these models, which is a phenomenal thing. But you also started that by saying, well, because if we don't, we're going to get behind other governments.
Yeah.
What are you seeing happen there?
So similar to what I was just saying, and just to clear the air for everyone here, it's CISA. Just for
CISA.
no worries at all. I just
CISA.
on a mission to educate about our role in the government. So I want to give an example of something that we were tasked to do to use AI to better protect our systems. So in the executive order, in addition to those risk assessments that I mentioned, we were also tasked to do an operational vulnerability discovery pilot to see how we can use large language models and other AI tools to better protect the .gov, so to the FCEB, the Federal Civilian Executive Branch. And so we are trying to quickly integrate these tools, not just into drafting memos or things like that, but also into the sorts of daily cyber defense tasks that we have to do as an agency. And that'll be critical to keeping up with the sorts of augmentation of capabilities that you mentioned.
Yep. Okay.
But we're collaborating a lot with international partners, not just our interagency partners, on these guidelines. So before we put out the safety and security guidelines specifically for critical infrastructure, in the fall we put out basically how to do secure by design for AI, and that was co-sealed with 23 international cybersecurity partners from 18 different countries, including all of the G7. So we are trying to all work together, not remake the wheel. There's plenty of work to go around, make sure that we are grounding ourselves in the work that's already been done, and then just being additive where we can.
That's good. Excellent. Okay, so
Very
based off of time, we've got one last thing. So any final thoughts for anybody?
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about this characteristics of trustworthiness for our AI systems. I think if we really reflect on it, I just want to throw out there that I think humans are not that great at these things either. So if we talk about transparency, accountability, fairness, and I would just challenge all of us, and I personally have been working on this a lot, to think about how I can be like a trustworthy AI system, and kind of, if we have more time, I'd give examples. But I think these AI systems are built in the context of humans and organizations and society.
Replicating us, right?
And they are replicating us. So
with our flaws.
Yeah, and I made a talk where I went way more into detail about this, but I'm super passionate about it because I think we all need to step up our game because these AI systems are reflecting us.
Yeah. Okay, fascinating. Yeah. So thank you, Lisa, for coming and giving your thoughts.
All righty.